So, welcome everyone, and for this Friday meditation and teaching on the not self aspect of insight practice. And as I've been saying this week, the focus is not on discussing or guiding you through this idea of the experience, the insight of not self. The idea is to understand more about the experience of self that we have. And today will be a little bit of a bridge between maybe self and not self. So the way that we prioritize ourselves, because we think a lot about ourselves, we are concerned with our own well-being, which is quite appropriate, but we're also anxious about ourselves. And we have a lot of desires, and those desires can be tied to our view of ourselves, how we want to be seen by others. We could have a lot of aversion that also is integrated and integral to how we experience the self, because we want to be safe, or we want to not be to suffer, and so the whole self is a project of pushing things away or avoiding challenges. And these become it's very easy for this self, the feeling, the experience, the gathering together, the global sense of I'm here and I'm here, to be penetrated or suffused with anxiety, with desire, with aversion, with confusion, with tension, with stress, with motivations being for and against. It's a lot of things, a lot of extra things come along. The idea of self is a magnet for it. The way we organize ourselves as a self is a magnet for a lot of things that are not inherently part of self, but that can actually gum up the process, make it more challenging in our life, and make it more complicated than it needs to be. And because one of the ways is to take the self as too much of who we are, to over-identify, so it's kind of the global sense. And so whatever comes along with the self, whatever emotions and attitudes, it becomes part and parcel of the self, and it becomes global. Global anxiety, global aversion, global confusion, global tension. But in fact, we are multifaceted human beings. We're whole ecosystems within us. And there are sources of emotions, motivations, sources of ease, relaxation, places within us where there is no tension. And maybe it's a very small place. And there is places where our thinking, the way we understand the world, the way we respond to the world, can be much wiser, much softer, much more at ease, comfortable with ourselves in a sense. And and at the same time, as we have anxiety around ourselves or tension around this idea of self. And one of the interesting things about meditation, Buddhism, is how we can learn to shift where we take up residency, shift where we think we have to latch on and figure out things, to manage for ourselves, do our work as a human being. And if we do it from this complicated place of self with all its tension, then it's all too easy to perpetuate that tension. But there is other places deep inside of us, the profound profound forms of sensing, knowing, intelligence within us that come out of a place of ease, a sense of well-being, a sense of sense of goodness, a sense of home, a sense of stability and settledness. And that's one of the purposes of samadhi, is to get kind of grounded and filled by this alternative location, this alternative way of being alive that is not narrowed or tightened around the concept, the idea, the associations that we have around me, myself, and mine. And so that learning to make that shift and to find this other center for ourselves is part of the purpose of Buddhist meditation. And some people might call this deeper, softer place where the tension of self is not operating as an aspect of self. Some people might prefer to think of it as who they are. And that can be quite innocent. And for now, it's not an issue that we want to address, but to actually build on that and appreciate it. So to assume a meditation posture and to gently close your eyes. And one of the opportunities with taking a few deeper, fuller breaths and relaxing at the beginning of meditation is, in fact, to shift the orientation of attention, of presence, of stability, out of the busy mind, the reactive mind, the anxious mind, the tense mind, and as we exhale, to settle, relax, shift the attention from the thinking mind, the selfing mind, to someplace deeper within. Maybe it's a still, quiet place deep in the torso. Maybe a deep, quiet, comfortable place within is supported by feeling the weight of your body supported by your chair, your cushion, the floor. The solidity, the stability that might give. Helps to shift from the control tower to the solid earth-like place within us. Relaxing on the exhale. Letting the breathing be normal. And on the exhale, let there be a gentling, softening of the thinking mind, the control tower, the location of tension around being the doer, the thinker, the experiencer. Softening, gentling. Taking a few moments to have a global experience of your body in whatever way that's easy. A broad feeling of presence, of awareness to the sensations and solidity and openness of inhabiting your body. Even if some of it's uncomfortable, let there be a broader attention than where the discomfort is. A broad awareness that doesn't have a clear boundary at your skin. There's soft, porous edges, maybe no edges at all, to the broad awareness here in the body. That within this broad awareness, breathing is like the waves moving through the ocean. Breathing is like a gentle movement through this broad awareness. Maybe allowing the inhale to begin at the settling spot, the grounding spot deep within. And follow the exhale back to that grounding spot. Place deep within where the last sensations of breathing occur. A place of stability, subtleness. And if there is in you any tension, pressure, stress associated with thinking, feeling, emotions, anything that might be associated with your usual involvement with yourself, leave that alone. Let it be there on the edges, not to be concerned with it. And instead, assume that the deepest home for yourself is deep within, in a place that feels comfortable, tension-free. Maybe it feels soft and cozy, sweet. Where maybe there is no tension, no anxiety, where there is a contentment just to be deep within, breathing with that place, breathing through it, breathing out of it, returning to it. Letting all the thoughts of self and self-concern be like children playing in a nearby room, and you settled here in the comfort of your inner life, at ease. Taking a couple of minutes to gently, softly quiet the thinking mind and to sense and feel deep within. Is there a place within that might be characterized in one of these ways? Contentment, calm, happy, settled, home, a sense of wholeness, integrity, a generative silence. Is there a place deep inside that feels more valuable, more satisfying than the anxious thinking mind, the swirling contractions of mind and thoughts and the self that comes along with it? Is there a more deep, centered place, even if it just hints of it, or intuition of it? And what is it like to see the world through that deep place instead of through the control tower? What is it like to accompany the world from this deep place? From the most peaceful place within. What does goodwill look like? What does care and love, compassion, how does that manifest out of this peace? And so then to end the sitting, if there is a deeper place in which to offer goodwill to the world, have these wishes. May the benefit of this meditation be used for the welfare and happiness of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free. Thank you. So hello and welcome to this fifth talk on the insight into not self. And it feels very important to not begin with that topic directly, but to rather begin by a better understanding of what our experience of self is, how the idea of self, the feeling of self manifests for us. And and I think it's fair to say that for many people, even if there is a self, which there's no denying that there's something like that going on, that many people overemphasize that self, are over preoccupied with it. And we see it, and many of us can see it easily in other people. We see that someone is quite conceited. Or we see that people have an amazingly strong kind of a conceit, a negative conceit, of being very critical of themselves, have a very negative view of themselves. And, there might be some appropriateness to see that we have foibles, we have things that are a little odd or maybe a little bit off. But the way in which we have created a self around that and are preoccupied and consumed with that is overdone. Psychologists say that's one of the leading causes of depression. By no means the only one, but one of the leading causes for depression is rumination. And I suspect most of that rumination is centered on me, myself, and mine. That somehow we're concerned with, I'm not good enough, I'm not getting what I need, or I'm making mistakes, or I'm inadequate, or I'm a bad person, or something. And so the strength of attention, the strength of getting glued to this whole idea of self, reinforcing it, having all this energy, all this tension flow around this idea, this sense of self, attention, a focus, a preoccupation, which is not so healthy and maybe not needed. I think it's probably fair to say that there's something about maybe Western culture, maybe the culture here in the United States, maybe it's modern culture, where there's an increasing emphasis on self. Social media, some people get completely consumed and depressed and upset and anxious about having enough friends, enough hits, enough followers on their social media. And some people spend an inordinate amount of time with what they look like and getting themselves fixed photographs of themselves. I've seen over my lifetime with events, with the coming of selfies and presenting oneself on social media, an amazing amount of focus on posing for pictures with clothes and looks and attitudes, is to present oneself in a particular way. And if you go back and look at photographs from 100 years ago, especially from the old monks in Thailand, who'd never seen a camera before and were sitting and meditating or sitting quietly and cross-legged, and they were going to be photographed, they had no reference point for what was going on. It never occurred to them to smile. There was nothing happy. There was nothing good going on. There was no give and take of conversations that between the camera people and them, and they were just being patient. They were told to sit there for a picture. They didn't know what that was even, and so they look completely serious, some of them, and fierce and gloomy. That somehow they don't have the bright, happy face that some of us put on for cameras. They weren't concerned about how other people at other times would see them and think about them. So this over-concern with ourselves, how people see us, how people will criticize us, over-concern with perfectionism, over-concern with we have to do it just right, over-concern. Some of that's been created by our society, some of it's created by our family experience, where maybe sometimes family members growing up will tell you who you are, that you're somehow bad, somehow you're supposed to be the greatest, the next president or something. And so the whole idea of self gets really strong. When my first son was young, my wife suggested to me that instead of saying good boy to my son if he did something nice or wonderful, I would say, wow, that was fun. That looks like really a good thing, good time. Kind of be excited and approving, but without something that defined who he was, a good boy. Because then he has to continue being a good boy to get his father's love or care. And so this overemphasized on self. That's not the same as saying there's no self. That's a whole different orientation. And it might be more useful because the whole teaching of not self can be a distraction from what's more important. What's more important is to be free of this tension, free of stress, free of clinging, free of this kind of over preoccupation with a small part of who we are. And you can feel, people who practice mindfulness and meditation can feel how preoccupation with self narrows attention. Some people have reported that there's a darkening, like there's no more light anymore, because we're so caught up in these thoughts and ideas and concerns and desires related to this important thing, the self. And let that fall away, or if that's not possible, fall away, to begin realizing that there's another place, another source within us from where we can think. I call it contemplation. Very soft, relaxed, profound feeling of thinking. We don't have to think with the control tower. We can. There's places within where we can find a kind of generative feeling of intuition, of intelligence, of knowing. Mindfulness itself, awareness itself, doesn't have to come from the control tower where it's willed mindfulness, but rather it's allowed mindfulness. It's allowed to flow and arise out of a deeper place of well-being inside. It doesn't mean that the preoccupation, rumination around self has stopped. It just means that this very precious resource that we have, attention, awareness, mindfulness, is no longer being used to feed that preoccupation, but rather it's used to nourish and feed a profound sense of inner presence, profound sense of peaceful, quiet, calm, relaxed, grounding here, to be really present here in the moment in a grounded, clear, settled way, where we're not rushing ahead, we're not rushing into preoccupations and thoughts, but rather what arises out of us if we're speaking almost as if it arises out from deep within, from the belly or deep in the torso. That where we're centered is not in the mental tension. We're not ahead of ourselves, not behind ourselves. We're not feeding rumination. We're not feeding conceit. We're not feeding this big preoccupation with self that, as I said, has grown in our society. What we're nourishing or cultivating is a profound sense of presence, attention, stability, coming from a deep place within. And if we want to have a self, that is a self that is valuable to stay close to. That's a self that has no tension in it. So when the Buddha said, excuse me, when the Buddha said, make yourself a refuge, your only refuge. Make the Dharma your refuge, your only refuge. He was pointing to the fact that there is a kind of place within, deep inside, that can be our refuge, our protection, our home, our sense of belonging that we carry with us, like a turtle carries its shell, but in this case, something deep inside. And so rather than arguing, is there a self, at this point in the process, we want to shift the locus where our life is based from the preoccupied self, the tense self, to a place that's much more calm and settled deep within. And when we start talking about not self, we're not negating this deeper source within. We're beginning to see that deep source is not something to latch onto, not something to cling to, not something to become tense about. It's something actually to open to and be freer to. And it turns out that the inner depth of who we are, the richest, most valuable parts of who we are, operates much better if we don't clothe it in self, if we don't build or create or make a self with it. We just let it be, let it operate in a profound way. So those are the thoughts, and I've said many times now this week, at this point, I'm not saying there's no self. I'm not even, teaching what not self is about, but I'm wanting you to become wiser and more clear about learning to see the complexity and the unnecessary tension that comes along with our ordinary senses of self. And that to see that clearly sets the stage for you too, for all of us, to become interested in an alternative. Part of what I point you to today. And so that will be the topic next week. And that'll also go slow, but I'm looking forward to continuing this very important topic. Thank you.